Roots of the Capitalism by Boriska Garlitsky, but I will tell in my words, of course, because I don't remember the exact text, but we can know so many liberals today, and by liberal I mean pretty much every capitalist, every person who believes in capitalism, every liberal saying that capitalism is something natural, and like laws of capitalism is something absolutely natural for the people, and it either exists forever and we can like find everything, every sign of it in ancient times, or it just didn't happen before people get educated enough or something along those lines. In reality, the situation was different. People like in 10th or 11th century never thought that capitalism is natural, and they didn't even understand that there can be such thing as capitalism. For example, private property did not exist before the pre-capitalist era, and like serfs and agricultural farmers worked at the land, and they lived at the land, and they belonged to the land, and therefore they believed that it's made by the god like this, and therefore they simply belonged to this land and live into this land, and even feudals could not sell their land. But there was, of course, a moment when we can pretty much describe that capitalism begins there. It's the end of the 13th and beginning of the 14th century. Two major things happen during that time. All the land in the Western Europe, in the Europe, Central Europe as we know it right now, all the land was already farmed, and there was simply a lack of the land. A lack of the land means not only the shortage in the food, but also mean that there is not enough wood to heat in, to produce the coal, wood coal, which was used in the cities by, how to say it, this word, people who produce stuff. So it was the lack of everything, and people in that conditions, like there was food shortage, starvations, there was not enough coal, not enough wood, not enough, of course, the animals to hunt in the woods, and feudals declared the woods it's their property, because only them right now can hunt for the animals in the woods, which they're simply not enough overall. And in these conditions also another thing happened all of a sudden. In Crimea, Tatars and Genoese people, another conflict happened, and Tatar Khan decided to throw his dead people in the city, because he can't take the city, and he thrown them the dead bodies of his warriors inside the city, and the plague begins, the Great Plague. Some people running from the Crimea, some Genoese salesmen, tradesmen, running to Genoa, and some of them was not lucky enough for Europe make it to Genoa, because if you know the history, you will know that there was a plague ships that was kept at the how to say it, in the open sea, kept in the open sea, so the people who came from Crimea could not infect the people inside the city. But some of them made it to the ground, to the soil, on the shore, let's say. I'm sorry for my English, but the plague begins in Europe, and in some countries as much as half population died off. In some countries it of course was like third of population, maybe even fourth part of population, but it's, let's say that there was pretty much up to the third of population of the Europe died off. And in such conditions, when the plague came, people was lack of food, people was lack of meat they needed, people didn't wash because there was not enough wood, not washed themselves enough, etc., etc. And even to survive the winter, it was pretty much big achievement. Immune system, of course, was absolutely shredded. In such conditions, the plague came into the Europe, and many people dying off. In case of Norway, for example, whole elite, whole nobility of Norway is died off. And happens to be that in England, nobility that was well aware about what's happening in Europe kept themselves inside the castles and survived the epidemic. They survived and came out, and when they came out, when the plague ended and when the epidemic ended, they came out from their castles, but there was simply not enough serfs who were going to work on the land. One part of them tried to overexploit those who survived the epidemic. But another part understand, or maybe they was simply a little bit richer than those who decide to exploit the existing people. They understand that it can be, we can make a change. We can make a change right now. We will pay the workers so they live on our land and work here for us and produce for us profits. And we will, and don't forget that, I didn't mention it, but at the same time, many money, exactly money, like silver money, silver coins, already existed during the time, and many of those was already accumulated in the hands of the few, but there was no private property, and therefore people could not simply invest them because even production was of course occupied by the people who produced. Therefore they can't invest. And after this, those people who accumulate big amounts of silver, they saw the opportunity and they invest those money into the hired workers' labor. They start to pay for people for their labor. The same happened with the production in cities, because in cities also the half of population maybe died off, and it means that we don't even have the time to teach new people. We simply will pay for those who survived. We will hire them and they will work for us, and they will produce for us profits again. And those people who accumulate wealth, not only those farmers or not only those nobility from the England, but all people understood that it's very profitable to invest in labor, in people's labor, buy this labor so people produce for them profits. And that's when we can say that the capitalism begins. 14th century and maybe beginning of the 15th century. So you can clearly see from the history, and many people simply don't study history and don't want to study history, think that it's stupid, but to understand the roots of the capitalism, you also need to study some history. That many different society, not like that. Circumstances create the society, and society create the man. It doesn't mean that capitalism is something inherited in our nature, or communism is something that inherited in our nature, or feudalism or slavery is something that inherited in our nature. Not the case. The circumstances, even the climate, you can clearly see that climate that changed during the time and caused famine and caused people get weaker, activities of population of people who just simply wiped out almost all woods, relationships between people, amount of resources accumulated, many different circumstances create the society, create the situation that can be used in one way or another, and therefore create opportunities, and of course possible opportunities like technologies of 20th century. It's of course the opportunities that change our world. So existence of private property and hired labor create opportunity to some to exploit many others. Even if those others get enough money for their labor, they still exploit it, because majority of the profits still kept by the investor, the capitalist, the owner of capital. That's what is capitalism in essence, and not some free market economy or, I don't know, some human rights, technologies, I don't know. What is your perception about capitalism? So capitalism existed as we know it, as we clearly see, the 15th century. It means that 1400s, for the 600 years, more or less. Most of it, of course, existed in Western Europe, of course, because it started there, and only later it moved somewhere in different countries. It's, for example, in Russia, which pretty much close to Europe, adopted capitalism only in the end of 19th and the beginning of 20th century. There was no capitalism before here. Also, of course, that caused the existence of capitalism and existence of hired labor created opportunities for the endless wars, because resources are shrunk during the time. There was not enough resources, and therefore you needed to go there to rob some of your neighbors who have those resources. And hired guns, in this case, just as any other labor could be hired, warriors also played a big role in the creation of capitalism. It means that, let me just give you a small example. And capitalism created thanks to two sources in general, in major sources. First is pluck, and the second is war. And pretty much we see it until this day. Neither pluck nor the war has ended. And we still living in capitalism. No matter what you think of it, no matter what is your beliefs, we still live in capitalism, just as previous 600 years. Enjoy capitalism.